Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the rolling forested hills around Mountain Air Lodge, about 5 miles from the edge of the eastern slope of the Canadian Rocky Mountains. The town of Sundre has been the subject of a few bear attacks on our channel and is only about 50 miles to the east. Near the lodge, the elevation varies between 4,000 and 5,000 feet, with rolling hills covered in stands of Doug fir, lodgepole pine, and white spruce mixed with quaking aspen and balsam poplar. Grasses and shrubs cover the ground, granting shelter and privacy for animals and humans alike. The climate here is a montane climate, which means winters are cold and snowy, and summers are mild and moist. The abundant wildlife here includes moose, deer, elk, and bighorn sheep. The predators roaming the brush include wolves, cougars, black bears, and grizzly bears. Don Peters was a 51-year-old resident of nearby Calgary and an avid outdoorsman. He hunted this area often and was familiar with the animals and the terrain. On Friday, November 23, 2007, Don had planned a weekend of elk hunting, with a return time of no later than 2 p.m. the following Sunday. Although he was going rifle hunting, Don preferred to dress head-to-toe in camouflage. Most rifle hunters prefer to wear hunter orange to ensure they're seen by other hunters, but Don had different ideas about it. Even Don's boots were camouflaged, just so you understand how seriously he took not being seen while he hunted. The area around Mountain Air Lodge was thick with trees, but clear-cuts were made by logging outfits. Once the timber is harvested, the patchwork of man-made meadows, surrounded by interconnecting stands of forests, creates an ideal location for predators to hunt. But Don wasn't the only predator hunting these transition areas on this day. After arriving at his hunting spot, Don built up a platform from deadfall logs and constructed a blind to conceal his location from animals passing by. He placed his gear in his blind, and from there not too much is known about what happened on Don's hunt. By 2 p.m. on Sunday, one of Don's friends, whom we'll refer to as John, became concerned about him. He wasn't the kind of person to say something and not do it. Perhaps Don had bagged a big old bull elk and was still packing it out. John hopped in his truck and decided to drive up to Mountain Air Lodge just in case Don needed some help and to allay his own fears. John drove around the area that he knew Don frequented, and it wasn't long until he found Don's truck. It was well into the evening time by then, and John got an uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. He immediately called the authorities and reported Don's disappearance. By early morning, November 26th, the RCMP and search and rescue teams were combing the area on quads, snowmobile, and horseback, searching on the trails and roads. Aircraft were searching for Don, flying in grid patterns, hoping for some kind of signal fire or other sign. Searchers on foot covered the brushier areas that the machines and horses couldn't get through, but none of them found Don. Given the time of year, the search for Don was turned up a few notches. The snow that had fallen was beginning to conceal any sign of him, so they knew it was now or never. A grid was set up and a very intensive ground search was executed, and was successful on Wednesday, November 28th. But the results were not what they'd hoped for. Don's body was discovered, buried beneath a large spruce tree, crammed behind a couple of logs. Snow had been piled on him, along with duff and dirt from the surrounding area. It was a clear sign that a bear had claimed his corpse as food, but wasn't conclusive proof that a bear had killed Don. Hunting is a rigorous activity, and it isn't too rare that a hunter has a heart attack or some other health emergency while in the woods. I've had friends die in the woods myself, and they were far too young to have it happen to them. If Don had died from a sudden health problem and the bear had come along and consumed part of his remains, then it would not be a case of predation. Don's body was gathered up and taken to medical professionals for an autopsy, while the wildlife officers investigated the evidence at the scene of his death. Not too far from his blind, investigators found Don's hunting rifle. It had been discharged and still contained the empty brass in the chamber. They searched the area around his rifle and found no blood trail, so they believed he'd missed whatever he was shooting at. All of his belongings and gear were still where he set them in the blind and were undisturbed. That's when they found some very telling evidence that cast a completely new shadow over Don's death. Grizzly bear tracks were found near Don's rifle and told a story that would be later confirmed by the coroner's autopsy. A curious fact that the investigation revealed was that Don's body was located only 200 yards from his vehicle, but his blind was a couple of hundred yards in the opposite direction. They wondered if he was trying to return to his vehicle to retrieve something he'd forgotten, or if he'd been searching for a new location to construct a blind when he was ambushed. Perhaps he was pursued to the location where his body was found. The broad area where the evidence was deposited provided a confusing and difficult situation for investigators. Before departing Don's attack scene, investigators carefully charted the locations of his gear, the path the bear had traveled, and where Don's body was located. They gathered bear hair left near his cached carcass, hoping it might come in handy, and already believed a grizzly bear was the culprit. Grizzlies hibernate later than black bears do, so it isn't as likely that a black bear killed Don, but analysis of the hair would reveal the facts soon enough. After gathering the data, it was all analyzed by wildlife officers. Given there was no animal cache nearby, they dismissed the bear as having attacked Don in defense of its own food. The track evidence revealed that the bear had stalked Don in a predatory manner before killing him, and they had the DNA evidence to tell them precisely what grizzly had done it. With a grizzly who had stalked and killed a person, the authorities closed the area and set out culvert traps. Although it was late in the fall, they hoped to trap it before it went into hibernation. The winter set in before their efforts brought success, but they had another plan they would implement over the coming months. By spring, Don's death was still on the minds of the public and the authorities. Culvert traps were once again set out near the site of Don's mauling, and now the waiting game had begun. It wasn't long before a grizzly sow and 2 yearling cubs were caught in the area on April 5, 2008. DNA samples were collected from the sow and connected her directly to Don's death. She was euthanized soon thereafter. Her cubs were left to fend for themselves, as wildlife officers believed they could survive, given their size and age. But a major question remained. What did they learn from their mother? Did they see her kill and consume Don? Local bear supporters were boisterous in their accusations against the sow's death. They claimed that killing her after she emerged from her den wasn't right, and leaving her cubs to fend for themselves was ensuring their death without her. Wildlife officials heard their objections, but decided on the matter based on their research and policy. After reviewing the facts surrounding Don's grizzly bear attack, I have a few questions for you. Do you think the sow emerged from her den in winter due to hunger and killed Don without her cubs witnessing any of it? Was Don running from the grizzly, or had she stalked him once he left his blind? What was Don shooting at, and why would he leave his rifle behind? Do you think it was fair for the wildlife officers to wait so long to kill the sow? I find this episode very interesting and mind-boggling. I'll be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Pine County, Minnesota. Near a small town called Duxbury is a swampy, forested area that is as close to virgin land as exists today. The elevation here is around 1,000 feet, and the marshy land is host to white and red pine, paper and yellow birch trees, sugar maple and balsam fir stands, with quaking aspen woven through the tapestry of flora. The St. Croix State Forest surrounds the town, extending to the southeast, and the Pine County Game Refuge is to the northwest. If you're getting the idea that preservation is a top agenda item for Minnesotans, you'd be right. The larger animals that wander the forests and swamps here include white-tailed deer, elk, bison, and moose, plus tens of species of squirrels, rabbits, and chipmunks. As you might expect, the predators living in these forests are just as diverse as the prey animals. They include bobcats, Canada lynx, cougars, coyotes, gray wolves, and a growing population of large black bears. On the evening of September 27, 2014, 44-year-old Brandon Johnson, 54-year-old Craig Lindstrom, and 24-year-old Trevor Nowak were enjoying their 12th annual bear hunting trip. The hunters preferred to pursue the bears with their bows, which is a whole new level of bear hunting. Lindstrom was a volunteer firefighter and certified in first aid, which would come in handy on this day. The hottest part of the day reached into the lower 80s, warmer than usual for this time of year. Nowak had stalked upon a large black bear earlier in the day and worked his way into a close-range shot with his bow. He drew back his arrow and let fly, striking the bear in the vitals. After watching the bear dash into the brush, Nowak approached the place where the bear was and recovered his arrow. Inspecting the arrow, he could see a thick layer of blood covering it, from broad head to fletching. This was evidence that the bear had been struck in a lethal spot, and its demise would be forthcoming. Nowak returned to camp and told the other hunters of how he had hit the huge black bear, and it had left a promising blood trail. Given it was late in the day, the hunters decided to pick up the trail in the morning, before reconsidering. They were experienced hunters, and pursued bears for their meat. The hunters discussed how if they waited until morning, the bear meat might be soured and inedible. Agreeing to follow the bear's bloody trail by flashlight, they headed back to the location where Nowak had shot the bear. Their headlamps lit up the dense foliage, creating ominous shadows as the hunters found the blood trail. The cloak of night hid anything only a few feet from the edges of their lights, and alerted any animal in their path of their approach. After a few hundred yards, the men came upon a river. Lindstrom carried his Glock 45 pistol and watched as Nowak and Johnson waded through the water up to their armpits as they crossed the river. The two hunters were armed only with knives and pressed the blood trail through knee-deep swamps in places on the other side of the river. Nowak and Johnson picked up the blood trail on the other side of the river and separated themselves from Lindstrom by a couple of 100 yards. Then a huge black shadow that refused to be chased away by their headlamps appeared. It was the giant black bear lying on the ground, seemingly dead. Approaching the bear's carcass, they were startled when it dashed back toward Lindstrom. Nowak and Johnson yelled to their friend that the bear was coming his way. His headlamp flashed left and right, trying to find the bear before it found him. Instead of seeing the bear, Lindstrom's attention was drawn back to where Nowak and Johnson were, as they began to yell. Johnson was staring into the darkness beyond the reach of his headlamp when the enraged black bear leapt upon him from the brush nearby. The impact of the bear sent Johnson's headlamp flying and knocked him unconscious. He came to as the bear stood over him, staring him in the face. Its jaws were wide open, and it moved to bite into Johnson's neck to kill him. He remembered seeing the outline of the bear with shining stars glittering behind it, and he felt one of its canines pierce his chin. Johnson didn't hesitate to defend himself. He struck out at the bear with his left arm, pushing its jaws away from crushing his neck. As he tossed his left arm, the bear sank its teeth into his forearm and twisted his hand all the way around. His ulna and radius bones crunched under the pressure of the bear's jaws, and Johnson responded to the pain by stabbing the bear with the hunting knife in his right hand. Stabbing the bear quickly and repeatedly, he tried to inflict as much damage to the bear as he could, as it held his forearm in its jaws. In the flashing lights, Nowak could see the bear over Johnson and yelled at the bear, trying to draw its attention. They hadn't brought bear spray, and Lindstrom had the only firearm with him, so it was all he could do at this point. As Lindstrom heard the hunters screaming, he pulled his pistol from his holster and jumped into the river to come to the defense of his hunting partners. The black bear dashed back into the brush, secreted by the dark of night. Lindstrom stumbled and tripped toward the other hunters as Johnson muttered, I'm hurt, to Nowak, and hoped the bear attack was over. It may have been Johnson's voice that brought the bear back for a follow-up attack. It once again rushed from the brush toward the injured hunter. Johnson had again stuck his left arm into the bear's mouth and repeatedly stabbed it with his right hand. During the furious attack, the bear twisted Johnson's left arm, severely breaking and gashing his arm, while enduring Johnson's stabbing defense. The bear stepped back after a few seconds of mauling the man and being stabbed several times. It growled for a moment, before pouncing on Johnson for a third attack. Johnson's left arm was now limp, so he used his right arm to drape it across his face. The bear opened its mouth wide, determined to end the hunter's life. Doing the only thing he could think of, Johnson shoved his right hand into the bear's mouth, along with the knife it held. He plunged the knife into the flesh at the back of the bear's mouth, and slashed and stabbed as many times as he could. He stabbed the bear with so much force that he broke 2 of his own fingers. The bear clamped down on his forearm with Johnson's hand still inside its mouth. It bit down and broke Johnson's arm bones in his right forearm and tossed its head, ripping ligaments and tendons, controlling his hand and wrist. Blood flowed into Johnson's eyes, blinding him. It was pouring from the bear's mouth and into Johnson's mouth, causing him to cough and choke as well. As he wiped the blood from his eyes, he could see blood pumping from the bear's mouth, as he knew he would kill it. After chewing up Johnson's right arm, it focused its attack on his leg, and then bit into his chest. His arms flopped in useless disobedience of his desire to fight the bear off. Just as Johnson realized he could do nothing to stop the bear, it disappeared into the brush again. At this time, Lindstrom burst through the brush and found his friends. Johnson was lying on the ground as Lindstrom started first aid. He searched for a pulse, but found none. Lindstrom wiped the blood from Johnson's eyes and asked him if he could breathe. Johnson replied, "I'm not going to make it. Tell my kids I love them." Although the black bear may have been circling the men, preparing for another attack, Nowak and Lindstrom began an effort to save Johnson's life. They improvised tourniquets on each arm and strapped them to his chest in contrived slings. They knew they had to get him away from the bear and to medical help as soon as possible. After wiping the blood from Johnson's eyes, the group realized the blood had come from the bear. Helping Johnson to his feet, they dragged him at times, the mile back to their four-wheelers. After a 3-hour struggle through swamps and across the rivers, the men bounced Johnson down the trail back to their camp on their four-wheelers. Using their cell phones, they reached out to 911, and a medical helicopter was dispatched to their location. Johnson was flown to North Memorial Medical Center in Robbinsdale. He endured 3 surgeries and months of rehabilitation before recovering. Lindstrom later stated that though the men were experienced bear hunters, they'd learned a few things that night. They should have backed out after not finding the bear near where it was struck by the arrow. They all agreed to carry sidearms whenever they pursued black bear from that point on. The following day, Lindstrom and Nowak returned with 8 other hunters to search for the bear. Ethically, they knew they couldn't leave the bear in the forest, especially given its injuries. A few yards from Johnson's attack site, the massive black bear was found lying on its stomach and resting its head on its crossed paws. It took the men 4 hours to drag the 535-pound bear out to their four-wheelers. Johnson's injuries include 2 broken arms and bite wounds to his jaw, face, legs, and chest. Even after this much pain and punishment, Johnson maintains he feels lucky to be alive. Lindstrom and his friends had the bear's hide tanned as a reminder of their time together. In Minnesota, there have been 6 black bear attacks since 1987, and only 1 was unprovoked by human behavior. Minnesota is home to between 13,000 and 18,000 black bears and has a fall bear hunting season beginning in September and ending in mid-October. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Is it reasonable to take up a blood trail on a wounded bear after a few hours of waiting? Do you think bear spray would have prevented this bear attack? Could the men have defended themselves with firearms from an attack in the dark? Would you follow a wounded black bear into the night armed only with a knife? I know there's no way I would do that. I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to a subdivision on Jacob's Ladder Road, near a town called Mountain Top in Wright Township of Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. The elevation in this area is around 1,500 feet, and the rolling hills are packed with fir trees, 3 species of maple, 3 species of birch, as well as serviceberry and muskwood. Bushes like elderberry and chokeberry provide shelter along the ground and yield their seasonal fruits to humans and animals. Common and plentiful animals here include elk, turkey, and white-tailed deer. The predators of this area include bobcats, coyotes, and black bears. About 110 miles to the southeast is the big city of Philadelphia, but state wildlife officers have declared all of Pennsylvania as bear country. Around Mountain Top, black bears have become a more common sight in the last few years. A longtime resident reported seeing only 2 black bears during his 22 years in the subdivision, but one of those sightings was of a bear running off with a 50-pound bag of bird feed it had snatched from his garage. Residents here have been feeding birds for decades, but this fat-rich food is also a preferred food source for a growing population of black bears. Jacob's Ladder Road has a few subdivisions that protrude into the surrounding forest. It is a beautiful location, cloaked by largely uninterrupted stretches of forest for tens of miles to the east. It's just the kind of habitat where bears can live and never see a human being, unless they choose to. In the world of bears, particular noises are more interesting than others.
Whenever their cubs are in trouble, they have their own version of a distress cry, and sows respond to it with thunder and lightning. Many of the young prey animals they feed on, such as calf elk, fawn deer, and injured rabbits, emit a high-pitched scream or cry to locate their mothers or as a sign of general distress. There's no way of knowing if the cries of playing children sound like any of these sounds, but it may have been a factor in today's episode. On May 2nd, 2023, a 5-year-old child, whom we'll call Jimmy, and his 14-year-old sister, whom we'll call Jill, were playing in their driveway. It was common to see the neighborhood children playing in the forest around the subdivision, and Jimmy and Jill's outdoor fun was just another day of laughter and enjoyment for them. All around the children's home, the trees pushed in very close to every house in their neighborhood, giving each one a feeling of privacy and isolation. The dense undergrowth not only granted the residents solitude, it also allowed wildlife to come within a few yards of homes in secrecy. As the children played outside, their mother took care of chores and kept an eye out for the kids. Jimmy's mama heard him crying out for her and emerged from the home to see a horrifying sight. A black bear had emerged from the brush near the home and had set its focus on her babies. As she ran toward the bear, it fled, leaving her children injured and bleeding, but alive. She quickly loaded them into the family vehicle and drove them to Wilkes-Barre General Hospital, about 12 miles to the north as the crow flies. Once the children were admitted to the emergency room, they were treated for bear bites and claw wounds. Though their injuries were not life-threatening, the incident was very concerning to residents and wildlife officials. Authorities immediately knew they needed to make sure the citizens were safe. Based on the description of the bear from the children's mother, they knew that they had no chance of differentiating the bear that attacked the children from the others. They decided to set out 2 culvert traps around the subdivision to see if they could catch the bear before it could attack anyone else. Jimmy and Jill's clothing was swabbed for DNA from the bear's saliva, and the samples were rushed to Dr. Jane Huffman of the Wildlife Genetics Institute at East Stroudsburg University in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. A DNA profile was pulled from the samples, and now the wildlife officers had to track the bear down that matched it. The Pennsylvania Game Commission monitored the traps and captured a bear in each trap on the evening of May 27th. One of the bears was a boar, and the other was a sow, and both appeared healthy. DNA samples were pulled from both bears and rushed to Dr. Huffman for comparison to samples pulled from the clothing. After a few days, the results were back. They revealed that the boar was not involved in the attack on the children, but the sow was involved. She was immediately euthanized, and her remains were examined for rabies. The rabies test is done only after the animal is dead, so her euthanization was part of the investigation. She was not found to have the disease, which allayed fears of officials as well as area residents. The boar was relocated to a remote stretch of forest far from the subdivision in hopes it would establish itself there, away from people. The Pennsylvania Game Commission estimates that the state has a healthy population of 15,000 black bears. Statements were issued to the public citing that the reasons for the attack on the children were unknown, but could have been caused by a bear being cornered by the curious children. They stated that dogs may trigger attacks, but the children were not accompanied by a dog. Black bear sightings in Pennsylvania have been rising, alarmingly around larger cities. They have been reported in Philadelphia, Montgomery, Bucks, Delaware, and Chester counties, and have been caught on security cameras mounted at homes many times. Black bears have been observed in Highland Park and Hill District in the city of Pittsburgh, less than 1 mile from downtown. I could find no source that indicated any city in Pennsylvania has a bear hazing program to drive bears away from urban areas. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think development is encroaching on black bear habitat in Pennsylvania? Would a municipal hazing program receive your support if you lived there? Was this bear trying to eat the children, or was it somehow cornered by them? Do you think the bear would have killed or severely injured Jimmy and Jill if it hadn't been driven off by their mother? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.